My fiancé cheated on me with my sister. My parents told me to forgive her. So I did the one thing they never expected. I inherited everything and gave them nothing. People think the worst kind of betrayal comes from strangers, but it doesn't. It comes from the people who call you family, the ones who are supposed to protect you, the ones who should have stood beside you, but instead chose to stand behind the one who hurt you most. 4 years ago, I was just like any other woman in love. I had the perfect fiancé, or so I thought. And while our relationship wasn't always storybook perfect, I believed in us. We were high school sweethearts. We'd grown together, matured together, made plans for forever. I never once thought I needed to keep one eye open in my own home. But betrayal doesn't knock at the front door. It slips in through the cracks. And in my case, it came wrapped in my sister's perfume. We'd never been close, me and her. Even when we were little, there was always distance. Some sisters share secrets and dreams. Mine shared my future, without asking. I caught them together in the worst possible way. And the worst part wasn't even the affair. It was the way they looked at me like I was the crazy one for being hurt. I ended things, with both of them. But the fallout didn't stop there. My parents, my own parents, turned the betrayal into a footnote. "It's over now," they said. "You can't stay mad forever." As if the broken pieces of my life were something I could sweep under the rug in time for the next holiday dinner. So I did the only thing I could. I left. I packed my things, moved across the country, and started over. No family visits, no phone calls, just distance, space, silence. Except, there was one voice that never left me, my grandfather. I was always the quiet one in the family, the one who never really caused waves, never asked for much, and definitely never made anyone uncomfortable. I was the youngest daughter, the bookworm, as they used to call me, with my head always buried in a novel or my nose stuck in some grad school textbook. My sister? She was the storm, loud, unpredictable, dramatic, and somehow always the one getting a free pass, even when she hurt people, even when she hurt me. We never had the kind of bond people expect sisters to have. No giggles late at night, no shared secrets, no unbreakable trust. We were polite, distant. I knew she didn't like me much, and to be honest, I never fully trusted her either, but I never expected her to take what she did. Not like that. 4 years ago, I was engaged to my high school sweetheart, the kind of guy who made me believe that some part of the world was still good. We had plans, a future. I thought he loved me. I thought we were safe, until I found out he'd been sleeping with my sister behind my back. You don't forget the moment everything inside you breaks. I remember the silence in my apartment after I read the texts, my knees hitting the floor, the shaking in my hands that wouldn't stop. And then the scream that came from somewhere deep, somewhere primal. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the most personal kind of theft, stealing not only my fiancé, but the last piece of trust I had left in my family. When I confronted them, she didn't deny it. In fact, she had the nerve to look me in the eye and say they were in love. She said it so casually, like she hadn't just wrecked my life, like I was supposed to understand. He left her 2 weeks later. Of course he did. He came crawling back to me, tears in his eyes, saying he made a mistake. My sister? She had a breakdown. A real one. Ended up in the hospital, and that's when the rest of the family shifted, like someone flipped a switch. At first, my parents were furious with her. They told her off. Told me they supported me. But once she got sick, once she played the victim, suddenly I was the problem for holding a grudge. My mom said, "You can't be mad forever." My dad told me I should be the bigger person. The bigger person. Like being betrayed, abandoned, and manipulated wasn't enough. Now I was supposed to comfort them? To put my pain aside so they could keep pretending we were one big, happy family? I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I packed up and left. I cut contact. I went to grad school on the other side of the country and didn't look back. If they wanted to pick her, fine. Let them have her. I didn't want to be anywhere near any of them anymore. The only person who didn't make me feel like I was crazy for being hurt was my grandfather, my papa. He was furious. I'd never seen that man raise his voice in my life, but he tore into my parents when he found out what happened. told them they failed both as parents and as decent human beings. He cut off my sister completely, said if she had even a shred of remorse, she would have fallen to her knees to apologize. When I moved back years later to take care of him, as he got sick, it was the first time I felt like someone in my family chose me. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, just because he loved me. He saw me. I cooked his meals, took him to his doctor's appointments, sat by his bed when the nights got long and he couldn't sleep, and I would have done it all again 1,000 times over. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged. Not to a family, but to a person who truly valued me. Then he died. And everything that came next? Let's just say, it would be the first time I ever saw the people who turned their backs on me suddenly turn around and reach out their hands. They say grief reveals the true face of a family. When Papa passed away, I thought the hardest part would be losing him. But it turns out, the hardest part was what came after. What they did once they realized he hadn't left them everything. Because the moment his will was read, the moment the reality of his intentions settled into the room like thick smoke, they showed me exactly who they were. He left me everything. Not just a token gift or a small gesture of appreciation. Everything. The house, the accounts, the land, the trust. My name, written over and over again, not out of spite, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Love. Papa had anticipated what would happen. Maybe he even knew them better than I did. He recorded a video with his lawyer explaining exactly why he made his decision. He said, "I'm giving it to the only one who gave when no one else did. To the one who never turned her back, even when it would have been easier. This is for her, and no one else." It should have ended there. His words were clear, final. But when have selfish people ever cared about boundaries? My parents called me 2 days after the funeral. My mother's voice had this strange mix of fake warmth and quiet rage, like she was chewing her words before spitting them out. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She didn't say, "Thank you for taking care of him." She didn't say, "He would be so proud of you." No. She said, "So, you're really keeping it all?" My father tried to sound reasonable. Said Papa had made an emotional decision. That he was old, confused. That he didn't understand how much they'd always been there for him. And that I was young, successful, and didn't need that kind of money. Then came the kicker. It would only be fair to split it, between the three of us. You, us, and your sister. My sister. The woman who destroyed my engagement, who stood smug in front of me as my world collapsed and never once said sorry. The one who let me become the villain in my own family, just because her heart got broken by the same man she stole. I didn't even answer them at first. I just listened. Let them talk. Let them beg without realizing they were doing it. Then my dad pushed further. Your sister can't hold a job. This would give her security. And your mother and I, we're not getting younger. That money could help us retire. Isn't that what your grandfather would have wanted? That's when I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe the audacity, the entitlement. They hadn't cared when I was breaking into pieces years ago. They hadn't called when I moved across the country to escape the pain they let fester. They didn't lift a finger when Papa was sick. And now they wanted to rewrite the story like I was the greedy one? I told them no. I said it plainly, without drama. I told them Papa's words were clear. That this wasn't mine to share. This was a gift entrusted to me by someone who had watched everything unfold and chose me, finally, when no one else ever had. I told them I respected his wishes, and I wasn't about to dishonor his memory just to make them more comfortable. My mother's voice cracked. You're punishing us. And maybe deep down, a small part of me was. But the bigger part, the louder part, was just done. Done playing the nice one, the peacemaker, the fixer. Done putting their feelings before my own. Done being the afterthought, the option, the bigger person expected to clean up their mess. For once, I wasn't fixing something someone else broke. I was protecting something someone else entrusted me with. My sister tried reaching out too, eventually. Not to apologize, not to make peace, but to negotiate. She said she was in debt, that she couldn't afford rent, that maybe I didn't owe her forgiveness, but I could at least show I wasn't heartless. She never once said she was sorry, and I think that's what hurt the most, the total absence of remorse. The expectation that I would just roll over, because that's who I used to be, but not anymore. It's strange how silence can feel louder than screaming. After I hung up the phone with my parents, I just sat there. For hours. No music, no TV. Just me and the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the old clock on Papa's wall, and the weight of everything pressing down like a slow avalanche. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My chest felt tight, my throat raw from holding it all in. It wasn't sadness exactly, not the kind that comes with losing someone you love. It was something deeper, heavier, like the last thread that tied me to the version of family I once clung to had finally snapped. All this time I kept thinking maybe they didn't know how much they'd hurt me. Maybe if I just explained it better or stayed away long enough or gave them space, they'd figure it out. They'd remember what loyalty looks like, what love is supposed to feel like. That family isn't about obligation, it's about effort, about showing up when it matters most. But they didn't show up. Not when I needed them, not when I begged them with my silence, not even when Papa got sick. They came around for the reading of the will, but they didn't come when his voice started fading, or when I had to hold his hand through the night, afraid it might be his last. I was the one who carried that. I watched him waste away, and I still made him laugh. I helped him write letters to people he wanted to say goodbye to. I tucked his blankets tighter when the nurses didn't, and I stayed even when it broke me in ways I still don't fully understand. And now they wanted to tell me he didn't mean it, that I didn't need it, that it wasn't fair. They weren't there when I needed a mother after mine became someone else's advocate. They weren't there when my heart shattered in front of them, and instead of catching the pieces, they swept them under the rug and asked me to move on. So they weren't there when I was building this quiet, lonely life on the other side of the country, just to keep myself from drowning in memories that hurt too much. I gave them so many chances, even after I left, even after the betrayal. Even when it made my skin crawl to be in the same room as my sister, I showed up for Christmas dinner that one year, and my mom had the nerve to sit me next to her, like nothing had ever happened. Like I should just get over it. That was the moment I started to see it. They never truly saw me, not as someone with feelings, boundaries, or a voice that mattered. I was the background character in their family narrative, useful when I was quiet, inconvenient when I wasn't. Even Papa, for all his love, for all the comfort he gave me, he was the only one who looked past the script they wrote for me and said, "You're worth choosing." I remember one night, near the end, I asked him if he ever regretted anything. He squeezed my hand, voice barely more than a whisper. "Only letting them treat you like you were lucky to be loved by them." And that's when it hit me. I wasn't heartless, I wasn't bitter, I wasn't vindictive. I was done. Done hoping they'd say sorry. Done waiting for them to realize the damage they caused. Done shrinking myself to keep the peace. They saw what Papa left me, and for the first time in their lives, they saw me as valuable, not because of who I am, but because of what I now had. That was the final cut. The moment I bled dry of any remaining illusion that we were ever, truly, a family. They made their choices, and so did I. After Papa's funeral, the house felt too big, too quiet. Every drawer still smelled like him, his slippers still tucked beneath the bed, his old mug on the windowsill filled with pennies he called lucky ones. I couldn't bring myself to move anything for weeks, not because I couldn't handle the grief, but because it felt like the last place where someone had truly chosen me. But even grief has its limits, and so does patience. The texts started coming fast, then emails. My dad's tone swung from guilt to anger to guilt again, like he was throwing every version of himself at the wall, hoping one would stick. My mother left voicemails saying, We're still your parents, no matter what, and you'll regret this when we're gone. Then came my sister. She sent me one long message with fake humility wrapped in venom. I know we've had our differences, she wrote, but we're still blood, and family doesn't let family drown. I stared at that line for a long time. She was right. Family doesn't let family drown. But they let me. They watched me go under and asked why I wasn't smiling while I sank. So no, I didn't respond. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I didn't even block them. I just muted the noise. Let them scream into the void. Let them hear their own echoes and wonder why I'd gone silent. And instead, I started building. I sold Papa's investment properties and put the money into a foundation in his name, one that offers scholarships to students who've been estranged or abandoned by their families. Kids like me, people who needed to feel like someone believed in them, even if they had no one left. I kept the house, though, not because I needed it, but because it's where I remember who I am. I updated the locks, gutted the old wallpaper, kept Papa's library exactly the way it was, down to the bookmark on page 76 of his last unfinished novel. I turned the guest room into a writing nook. I built a small garden out back like he always wanted. I let the silence in, but this time it was peaceful, clean, like I could finally breathe in a house that didn't ask me to be anything but whole. A month later, I got a letter in the mail from my parents. Not handwritten, just typed, cold, and clearly drafted by someone else. A lawyer, maybe. It said they were requesting a mediation over the estate, that they still believed Papa didn't mean to cut them out, that they would be willing to settle for a fair split for the sake of family. That's when I knew they weren't done trying. So I responded. One line, typed. No greeting, no warmth. The last time you spoke to me like family, you asked me to get over being betrayed. So I did. And now I'm over you too. That was it. And I didn't hear from them again. Maybe they finally understood. Maybe they realized I wasn't bluffing. That I wasn't their doormat anymore. That I wasn't the sad little sister they could guilt into giving up what she'd earned. What she'd been entrusted with by the only person who ever truly listened. My quiet revenge wasn't cutting them out. It was refusing to explain myself anymore. It was living well, living free, living without the weight of a family that only loved me when it was convenient. I didn't slam the door behind me. I just walked away and let it close on its own. And this time, I didn't look back. Sometimes people say that time heals all wounds, but they never talk about the scars. Mine don't ache anymore. Not the way they used to, but they're there. Quiet reminders of every moment I stayed silent when I should have spoken, of every time I gave love where there was only expectation, of every second I mistook obligation for family. I don't hate them. That's the part that surprises me the most. I don't spend my nights angry or replaying the betrayal. I don't stalk their social media. I don't wait for their next move. I simply don't care anymore, because they don't live in my world now. And that's not punishment, it's peace. I found a life beyond the story they wrote me into. One where I'm not the understudy to my sister's drama. One where I'm not reduced to a bank account, or an afterthought, or a convenient listener when the guilt gets too loud. One where I'm not forced to set myself on fire just to keep others warm. Papa used to say, "You teach people how to treat you by what you allow." And I finally stopped allowing everything. The foundation in his name is thriving. The house is quiet and full of light. I've started hosting small dinners. Nothing fancy, just people who see me, friends, colleagues. A few folks who remind me that found family is just as real, if not more sacred, than the one we're born into. I never replied to that letter, never called, never met with any mediator, and no, I never sent them a cent. Because the truth is, the inheritance wasn't the money, it was the clarity. The moment I stopped asking, why don't they love me the way I need, and started asking, why am I still waiting for them to? That shift, that freedom, is worth more than anything Papa left behind. But he knew that, and that's why he left it to me. Because he knew I'd use it for more than survival. I'd use it to build something honest, something real, something mine. So, if you're watching this and you've ever been made to feel like you're asking for too much by wanting the bare minimum,